Hi, it's Dwyer. It is August 13th, 2025. GamblersAdvisory.com, a free site. BettingAngle.us, a free site. Remember, the opinion you should follow should be your own. Just consider this video to be a second opinion from a complete stranger online. Folks, let's be blunt. In my opinion, 25%. 25% of elite fighters are using some kind of performance enhancement, right? 25% are involved in some protocol that enhances what they do in a boxing ring. Now, I haven't taken a poll. Lord knows I'm not going to trust any answers I receive from athletes that threaten their livelihood, threaten a suspension, right? But just understand, you know, I don't believe that everyone is altruistic. The money is simply too big. The athletes, in my opinion, look too unnatural. What you want to do is go back to the 1960s and look at the guys. YouTube's flooded with videos from that era. Look at the guys who were big and powerful in the 1960s. Look at the amount of body fat on them. And then contrast that with the guys in boxing today. Right now, in my favorites folder right now, I have a video. It's from an outfit I respect, Fighters Corner, right? And they have a video where, some fighters are throwing out hard language, accusing others of using PEDs. Right now, one of the fighters doing so is Evander Holyfield. Great fighter, no question. Great fighter, right? And Holyfield wonders whether one of boxing's pound-for-pound best, Canelo, is juicing, right? This is in the piece. Well, what I'm going to do, and for defamation purposes, I have to be careful, right? What I'm going to do, without expressing an opinion here, is I'm just going to read from an article called, and you can Google this article, I'll put a link to the article in the description of this video. So you can click on the link and you can be taken to the article. The article is Evander Holyfield speaks out on the infamous Evan Fields episode. It's dated May 30th, 2011 by James Slater, right? I'm just going to read from the article. I'm not making a statement here. I'm just reading from an article. Here's what the article says. During a 2007 investigation of the company Applied Pharmacy Services of Alabama, let me repeat that, Applied Pharmacy Services of Alabama, it was discovered how a customer named Evan Fields was buying steroids. A phone call was placed to the number of Fields, and lo and behold, Holyfield picked up. Instantly denying any wrongdoing, the former four-time heavyweight champ stated that the medication was for his dad, who had a heart condition. Then in parentheses it says, and is now deceased. Close parentheses. Right now, folks, let's just ask a couple of questions which will go unanswered. Right? Why would Holyfield's dad need to use the name Evan Fields? Right? We'll just ask that question. Also, this information is a little bit light in this article, but if the dad has a heart problem, wouldn't there be a valid prescription? Why would they be getting the drugs from Applied Pharmacy Services of Alabama? I'll leave those questions unanswered. But what I want people to do is to look at the video, because this is where we are in boxing. Right? And you're going to see they're talking about Canelo, and they're talking about this upcoming Terence Crawford fight. So in the video, they interview Terence Crawford's trainer, Bomac. And you'll notice that Bomac, truth is stranger than fiction, Bomac is wearing a cap that has SNAC on it. Right? Snack. This is the company that supplied Barry Bonds with the cream and the clear. Right? This is Victor Conti's company. Now let me say flatly, I'm not accusing Conti, who spent time in prison years ago for business-related reasons, right? I'm not accusing Conti of breaking any rules today. I'm not. In fact, Conti is someone who you want to follow, because Conti knows nutrition, he knows hormones, he knows sleep cycles, he knows, how athletes have broken and deceived drug tests in the past, right? He knows all of this. And Snack sells several supplements that you can buy at Walmart today. Now let me just make a few points here. And truth be told, Bomac's not the only trainer wearing Snack gear. I mentioned that the Oscar Duarte fight featured Robert Garcia, the lead trainer, and he, of course, was wearing Snack gear, right? He had Snack on his clothes, right? It's good advertising for Snack. I myself have used Snack's ZMA, right? This is a supplement that is supposed to help you sleep better. Folks, I'll just tell you flatly, it was too heavy for me, right? It certainly works. It knocks you out, but let's just say after a while I thought, gee, I was sleeping too deeply, right? I'd wake up, I wouldn't know where I was. Understand too, other drugs include hypoxazoline, aerobitine. Let's just say Snack is in the supplement business. That's where we are in boxing today. Right? I would say more than 50% of fighters are on supplement protocols. Right? I believe, given the fast clearance times of some of these drugs now, I believe 25%, 1 in 4, just looking at the bodies, how unnatural they look. Looking at earlier films of the fighters, seeing baby fat and, regular looking guys, and then seeing these fighters today, much older, in their 30s, and suddenly the guy has no fat on him. I would say 25% are, let's say, breaking rules as part of their preparation regimen. That's the world we live in. I'm not going to point fingers and say, I know this guy's breaking rules, because I don't. But I believe if you're a gambler, you need to have your own list of guys you feel might be over supplementing. We'll just create a word here. Right? Guys you feel, if they were in a strict jurisdiction that, was rigorous with the testing, and you need to keep track of where people are fighting, could be in trouble. Right? Let me also say, too, that In public, everyone denies what's going on, right? I believe in private, people know there's more to the story. So, without naming names, there is a, we'll call him high profile athlete. I won't even name the sport. His wife had a trainer. The trainer started buying drugs from Carlos Acevedo, who had been involved with the founder of Biogenesis, right? This is the outfit that apparently Major League Baseball felt Alex Rodriguez was involved with when it sanctioned him, right? Well, just understand, the wife's trainer of this well-known athlete was buying drugs from Carlos Acevedo and was referring clients to Carlos Acevedo. Well, let's get back to the athlete. The athlete's business manager at one point stepped in and bought testosterone directly from either Biogenesis or Carlos Acevedo. So the Athletes League investigated, and the Athletes League concluded that the athlete didn't know what was going on, wasn't involved in any wrongdoing. So we're supposed to believe that in this world where, a positive drug test could lead to disqualification, could cost an athlete, several weeks of salary, we're supposed to believe that an athlete's wife just happened to have a business partner who decided to buy drugs, right? We're supposed to believe the athlete's business manager just happened to decide that he needed testosterone for weight loss purposes. Understand a concept that was developed during the Kennedy administration. It's called plausible deniability. Right? What happens is these athletes put layers around themselves where you're supposed to believe that the people around them are doing things on their own volition that have nothing to do with the athlete. Right? The athlete's business manager continued to work with the athlete after this, right? One would imagine if you're a clean athlete, you would say, player, what are you doing? Buying testosterone from some shopping mall setup, right? You would say, hey, I'm paying you and trusting you so that you don't make moves like this that jeopardize my credibility with the public. That's not what happened, right? So, let me just say, certain drugs, and I'm not accusing anyone of anything, right? I'm leaving that to you. Because if you're a gambler, you have to continually ask yourself several times a day, what are the odds that A, B, or C, right? You're about to bet on a fight, on a baseball game, on a football game, and you have to, stop and think, well, what are the odds that this could happen? What are the odds that I bet against KC? I think, wow, this is preseason. They're going to be playing backups. And then I turn on my TV and I see Pat Mahomes at quarterback. Right? Well, let me just say, clenbuterol. Let's just name an elephant in the room, right? Canelo got busted for clenbuterol in the past. Clenbuterol has one of the fastest clearance times of all of these drugs from the human body. What I need for people to understand, too, is that boxing has many parts. You're not just looking at drugs that raise testosterone, right? You need to look at drugs like clenbuterol that help you make weight. That's a distinct advantage. right? If I'm set to fight at 147 and I'm walking around days before the fight at 151, and I decide, okay, I'm not going to drink water. Not that that's the best thing for your health, but that's what fighters do. I'm not going to drink water. Then you're in the sauna. You're wearing a rubber suit. Again, this is what fighters do. You're wearing a rubber suit to sweat out the extra weight. And you still aren't there. Clenbuterol is supposed to speed up your metabolism. It might be easier to drop pounds on clenbuterol than it is being in the sauna wearing a rubber suit. Right? Understand, your ability to make weight is a skill that can give you a distinct advantage. Let's talk about another drug, and this is the drug you need to focus on the most, in my opinion. EPO, right? This is the drug that Lance Armstrong and others involved in cycling were taking. Understand, EPO, incredibly fast clearance time through your body. Right? It's out of your body in about 48 hours. If they don't catch up with you within 72 hours of you taking EPO, they're going to have a hard time proving that you ever took EPO. Because this is the kind of substance that appears naturally in the body. Now let me say this diplomatically. The testing protocols aren't set up to deal with microdosing. They're just not. Also, understand the way drugs work. EPO, for example. EPO is supposed to help your bone marrow create more red blood cells. Right? Red blood cells contain oxygen and give you stamina. Now, you and I know stamina is crucial in boxing. You're watching a fight, a guy is winning the early rounds, he looks great, he's ready to, win this fight, then suddenly he'll hit the wall. Round 7, round 8. Some fighters can't recover from hitting the wall. Suddenly your guy who was on the way to delivering a payday on your bet, your guy's holding on. You're suddenly, for the first time in the fight, looking at the clock in the corner of your TV screen. Right? You're thinking, man, is my dude going to last another 40 seconds here? It's like your guy's breathing out of his mouth. He's getting hit with shots. He doesn't have the energy to catch up with his opponent. His opponent starts circling him. Right, folks? We've all been in that situation, betting on the wrong side of a fight, and you're heading into the championship rounds, and your guy's on fumes. Well, EPO would give him the extra stamina. EPO would give him the energy to finish the fight. He doesn't have to be stronger. He just has to have more stamina. Now, here's what people need to know about EPO. Victor Conte has openly talked about this. Right? If you take EPO, your red blood cells are, I should say can be, depending on your body, elevated for 100 to 120 days. Right? 100 to 120 days. So understand the way things work. A fighter could be out of the sport. He could be on EPO. He could be microdosing. His body builds up red blood cells that'll last him for 100 to 120 days. And then the guy signs for the big fight. Then he keeps that advantage, that stamina advantage, by working hard. But understand, he's gotten a boost. He's able to work harder preparing for the fight because he started the preparation on third base with a lot of red blood cells. Right? Once he's out of the first 72 hours after taking EPO, he's scot-free. because he has the advantage of the extra red blood cells, but the EPO is not going to be found in his system. I bet on a fight years ago, decades ago. It was well, let's just say, I bet on the fight. It was a rematch. I thought a certain fighter was going to win, and I was astonished by his opponent's level of stamina. It was astonishing. Well, you know the rest. That fight went to a decision. The opponent won the decision. Then years later, here on YouTube, there was video deposition evidence. And the fighter, under oath, at a video deposition that was posted on YouTube, admitted to using EPO. Right, folks? Let's go further. Go back to the 1990s. Just understand that HGH was hard to test for that. HGH leaves your system within 2 to 3 days. Right, folks? Understand, I would argue that in the 1990s, PED augmentation was rampant. All you have to do is look at the bodies of the fighters. Right? Every decade has had pro fighters. Right? The elites can financially support themselves off boxing. We're hearing stories about how hard Archie Moore trained, Sonny Liston trained. Right? There's stories of how Rocky Marciano would run miles every day. They trained hard in the past. How come those guys from back then don't look anything close to how several fighters looked in the 1990s? You had a guy come up to David Haye. I'm not accusing David Haye of anything. You had a guy come up to David Haye. He wanted to fight with David Haye. David Haye's response was, okay, well, you're going to have to pass a drug test. Folks, that fight still hasn't happened. Right? The guy calling out David Haye backed down. Right? Just understand what's going on here. Right? With microdosing, the theory is that I'm taking just enough EPO to credibly say, oh, well, that's natural. To raise my red blood cells a little bit, but not enough for the testers to say, that's unnatural. Right? Understand, once I get the boost in red blood cells, I can maintain with microdosing. I don't have to use enough EPO, where it's obvious that some of the EPO in my body is from a foreign entity. Right? So I need for folks to look at some fighters. I'm not going to accuse anybody here. Right? But look at some fighters. Look at the absence of body fat. Look at the age of the fighters. Right? Understand, even weightlifters in their 30s start to lose definition. Right? Look at the fighter, realizing that the fighter is not a professional weightlifter. The fighter has to be spending some time actually sparring and stuff like that. And then ask yourself the question, is this natural? Is there the possibility that this guy is juicing? There was a time when Anthony Joshua crossed the Atlantic. I'm not accusing Joshua of anything. And he was going to fight a fighter who at times has weighed more than 300 pounds in a fight. Now, we've all been following boxing a long time. How often have you come across that, where the guy actually looks muscular? So Anthony Joshua was about to fight Jarrell Miller. Now, what's important about Miller failing the drug test? And Miller, of course, from New York City, a boxing hotbed. In other words, this is a guy hanging around well-known gyms, right? Hanging around many other fighters, right? What's interesting with Jarrell Miller's failed drug test are the number of drugs in his system. Please go back and look at that story, right? So I'll just say, the way I look at boxing, I can't tell you with certainty who's juicing. But my operating assumption is that there is a 1 in 4 chance that somebody in a high profile fight is at least microdosing. Right? And understand what that means. Some of these drugs need to be taken intravenously. It means that there's a group out there helping this guy learn about drugs with fast clearance times, right? Helping the athlete understand that HGH is different from Winstrol, right? Letting a guy understand that we microdose on EPO, eventually our red blood cells are going to be elevated. Then if we sign for a fight, and if we're subject to VADA testing, then we have to back off the EPO and be ready once 72 hours have passed from taking the drug. Be ready to submit to whatever tests, knowing that we already have the red blood cell advantage from the juicing. Right? So no, I don't think boxing, even with VADA, is pristine. Let me point out too that you need to pay attention to where fighters fight. Right? You hear the fights in a certain location, you need to quickly research what the drug testing protocol is in that location. I can tell you in California here, it's pretty stringent. Right? I can tell you there are states in the United States that don't have boxing commissions. If some big name is fighting in some state that's out in the middle of nowhere, you should, particularly if you suspect the guy might be juicing, you need to do a quick study on whether VADA is involved in the fight. Understand, some of these sanctioning bodies require the champion and the first 3 contenders to submit to VADA testing. Right? If you're contender number 6 or number 7, if you're known enough, you might not want to become one of the top 3 contenders. Simply to avoid testing. Simply to give yourself the opportunity to fight who you want. Right? If you're popular enough, you can jump from the 6th position, the 7th position, the 8th position to actually challenge for a title. You won't be the mandatory, but you also won't be busted cutting corners. Right? If you're a number 2 contender, they can knock on your door on Christmas Day and demand a drug test from you. Right? Think it through. Anyway, those are my thoughts. I'm looking forward to Crawford and Canelo. I understand Eddie Reynoso's gym has had some problems. Right? I understand that, it's likely that Bomac is, with Snack, and Snack's legal now, right? They're with Snack, and they're crafting a nutritional component to Terence Crawford's preparation. Right, folks? Your assumption should be that at least 50% of fighters are involved in, you know, rigorous monitoring of the levels in their body of certain nutrients, etc. Those are my thoughts. Let me hear yours. I hope you leave them in the comment section of this YouTube video. Thanks for stopping by.